Yes, good morning, good morning. Ah, okay, so, the monks. Remember the monks doing that? They have completed their, 109-day trek, their walk for peace across America. And it concluded in this really beautiful gathering at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I was watching it online, and just the love and the gratitude that was being expressed. They were expressing gratitude for everybody who supported them, who made this possible. Everybody was expressing gratitude to them for doing it. And there was just, when the camera panned, you could see just the kindness and the compassion in everybody's face. It came across the live stream. It was so beautiful. And they acknowledged that this kind of love and compassion is hard to find in this world and is not reflected in a lot of the policies. They were talking about that. And they mentioned about the importance of practicing peace, how we all need to practice this inner peace, cultivating the inner peace, and then sending it out into the world, right? And you remember the monks. I think maybe I have a slide on that one. What he said, he reminds us every day. We start our day by saying, "This is going to be my peaceful day. This is going to be my peaceful day." Yeah. And now they're gone. They've gone back home. So it's up to us. Uh-oh. It's up to us to remember and practice peace. It's up to us to do this. And it's not always easy, is it? Not always easy. I mean, it is here when you're in this spiritual community surrounded by loving, supportive people who were committed to a practice of cultivating peace and love in their hearts. It's easy, right? And then we go out into the real world, and what do we see? Kind of the opposite of that very often. In fact, we see a lot of anger. We see a lot of hatred. We see a lot of division. We see people, real people, being hurt by the policies of fear and retribution. And we do our best to stay centered in our love. We do our best to stay centered in a place of love and to know love. And then from that place to move forward into meaningful action, as Reverend Pat talked about last week, to do what we can to help create a world that works for everyone. We do our best. And so let's explore what can help us with this, okay? That's kind of what this chapter is about. Brene Brown begins her 4th chapter in this book, Braving the Wilderness, which we are using this one as inspiration for this talk series and the book study. She begins it with a quote from James Baldwin. I have that. You're all familiar with James Baldwin? He says, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." Right. Deep. And she goes on to explain in this chapter how much of the anger and hatred that people feel is really rooted, deeply rooted in unacknowledged pain, unrecognized pain. And that we all have it. We all have some degree of pain. We're all struggling with something, right? Anybody here not struggling in some area of their life? even the monks said that that journey was arduous. 2,300 miles on foot in the middle of winter, they said that was difficult. They did it anyway. And really, I think just trying to make our way, navigate our way through an upside-down world that is based in a belief in separation, that we're separate from Source, we're separate from our good, we're separate from each other. This ego identity, human-only world, that's painful because we're so out of alignment with who we truly are, with our true spiritual self. And, honestly, if we're honest, none of us lives 100% from our unconditionally loving divine self and in the flow of limitless abundance of good at all times. Yeah. And so there's pain and there's fear, which gets covered over by anger, she says in the book. In fact, she says it's easier to be pissed off than it is to be hurt or scared. And I think I have this one quote, "Pain that is denied or ignored becomes fear or hate. Anger that is never transformed becomes resentment and bitterness." And so when people share that anger and bitterness, it grows. And sometimes it's a way people bond, Sometimes we find a community of people who share the same rage. And it takes on a life of its own. And it looks for someone to blame. And so it creates the other. And that's how you get extremes on either side. One of the ways. That's how we get extremes on either side, and we see it reflected in our world. We see it reflected on social media. We see it reflected on television. People screaming. A lot of words spoken, nobody listening, though. And it's easy to look at the other side and think, well, they're the problem. They're the problem. But that just adds more anger to the mix. And so those of us on a spiritual journey, on a spiritual path, we have our work cut out for us. We have work to do. And first and foremost, that work is to heal our own pain, is to transform our own resentment, and then to do what we can to once again center in our peace, to cultivate that peace, to cultivate that love. And it's our intention to stay there. And again, from that place, we move into action doing the best we can to help create, a world that works for everyone. Creating a world that works for everyone. Doesn't that sound good? We want a world that works for everyone, not just us, not just privileged people. A world that works for everyone. And it's an arduous journey, isn't it? We are in the wilderness, for sure. So the title of this chapter is called, what did I do? The title of the chapter is, It's Hard to Hate People Up Close, so lean in. So lean in. So the idea is that when we do, we see another human being trying to make their world, their way in the world just like we are, struggling just like we are, maybe with different things, but, having some experience of pain, maybe having some past trauma that hasn't been worked through, let alone acknowledged. And maybe they are alienated in some way. Last week we talked about the high lonesome. Maybe they haven't learned to work with that high lonesome. They're feeling alienated. So this is our doorway into being compassionate for those who we feel are hateful. It's a doorway in. We want a doorway, right? So Father Richard Rohr, I'm becoming a real fan. He said, every human being seems to have in some form that deep sense of being inadequate, insecure, separate, judged, and apart. It's almost the human condition, yet it takes 1,000 different disguises showing up uniquely in each of us. Alienated people stop trusting that reality is good, that we are good too, and that we belong to God and to each other. It's this sense of disconnection, however, that creates a yearning for the divine reconnection and recommunion. In other words, in the dualistic mind of disunion, and yet with the constant invitation back into union. Isn't that beautiful? And it's so a hopeful way of looking at things, that we all have this deep yearning to know, to experience our true divine self and to be connected with others, right? We all have that yearning. And honestly, it is our human nature to see ourselves in others. It's our innate nature to see that everybody has the same basic needs that we do, that everybody deserves respect and dignity, that everybody deserves the same rights that we enjoy. We are all one human family, right? That's our innate nature. It goes against our nature to inflict harm on somebody, to disrespect somebody. It goes against our nature to kill somebody. I've always thought that the reason that so many vets come home with a lot of PTSD and that there's such a high propensity for suicide, because it goes against your nature. It goes against our innate nature to kill someone. That is, if we see them as human. It's when we dehumanize that we subvert our innate nature. And she talks about this in the book. And she says, successful dehumanizing creates moral exclusion. Successful dehumanizing creates moral exclusion. And we can see through history, so many examples of, when we've looked at groups of people and seen them as something less than human, based on skin color or nationality or religion or gender or ideology, that is when we spiral down. I mean, we can certainly think of that being that dehumanizing, being what justified slavery in this country and elsewhere. That we could enslave another human being. And of course, in Germany in the late 30s, early 40s, to justify 6 million people who happen to be Jewish killed. And not to mention, how we treated indigenous cultures in this country and elsewhere. So in all of these cases, it's groups of people that we depict as something other than human, as savages, or animals, or criminals. So we want to be careful, because we can it's not too much of a stretch to see parallels about what's happening here now. Right? So we want to keep our eyes open, because it is our spiritual mandate to see humanity in everyone, to see divinity in everyone without exception, which takes practice, It takes practice. And to speak up when we see it happening to vulnerable populations. To speak up. We just want to keep our eyes open. So, let's go back to the title, People Are Hard to Hate Up Close. So when we lived in Los Angeles, the last place that we lived was in Sand Canyon, kind of out a little bit further. So we were blessed to have really wonderful neighbors. Just okay. There was that one guy who lived right behind us. With the exception of him, we had really great neighbors. And in particular, the guy across the street, Rob, and his family. They were just like the epitome of, they were always there for us and others, And the thing is, he was on the opposite side politically. He was a gun-owning, gun rights, anti-abortion, NASCAR-loving, nothing wrong with NASCAR, Catholic, conservative, and the most amazing person ever. He lived his faith. He lived into this idea of love thy neighbor. He lived it. He lived into welcome the stranger. He had a foster daughter that they took in that our kids would play with. And then he had other people in who you may not think, would, and would always give people a second chance. He was a really lovely human being. Now, we never talked politics. I don't know, it was easier to not do it back then. I don't know. I sometimes wonder what it would be like now. And how would he feel about how we're treating the stranger now? I don't know. But here's the thing. If I'd never known him up close, I would have judged him harshly. I would have I'm not giving that guy the time of day. It's hard to hate people up close. So the question is, how do we get up close? How do we give ourselves the opportunity for connection? So in the book, Brene Brown shares an interview with this researcher by the name of Dr. Michelle Buck, who does conflict transformation, which is really, in a nutshell, about leaning in, listening, being brave, not avoiding the difficult conversation. And she calls this conflict transformation. We've all heard of conflict resolution, which she says kind of just brings you back to the same place you started, and often has somebody, a winner and a loser. But conflict transformation, she says, allows the conflict to take the relationship to a deeper level than before, and to discover things, possibilities that didn't exist before. It's really, really beautiful. And as this process happens, you're keeping in mind that higher intention of connection. Rather than wanting to be right, winning the argument, having the higher intention of connection. So we're going to do a little experience of this right now. I want you to find a partner, pair up one-on-one. It could be the person sitting next to you or behind you. Pairs. Partner up in pairs. And when you do, decide who will be A and who will be B. Who is A? Who is B? Does everybody have a partner? Okay. Raise your hand if you're A. The A's, raise your hand. Does everybody have a partner? Yeah? Okay. Let's take a breath. Okay. We are going to say something to that person that we're across. We're going to look in their eyes. It's up on the screen, but I'm going to say it so that you can repeat after me. All right? So just repeat after me. Look in their eyes and say, "You may have a different view of things than I do. And we may never agree. But I respect you, and I love you." All right, turn around. So the B's now say it to the A's. Ready? Take a breath. Here we go. You may have a different view of things than I do, and we may never agree. But I respect you, and I love you. Yeah. There we are. You see how easy that was? So, yeah. It's simple. Not easy, but simple. So here is your assignment for this week. I want you to find somebody that you disagree with on something. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It just could be differences in food, differences in thinking, differences in, AI or not AI. So somebody who has a different view, and sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk. And ask them what fuels your belief. What has led you to believe as you do, with the intention of that higher connection. Rather than coming from, I want to win this point, or I want you to hear me, or I want to be right. The intention of connection. Now, you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to be convinced. In fact, you can leave the conversation with something like, "Well, we don't agree on this point, but I respect you, and I respect your beliefs, and I love you." Okay, can you think, you got a question? Well, sure, why not? Do you have a different view of anything from your spouse? Maybe one or two things. Do you have a question? Can you go through what?
Go to a restaurant.
Uh-huh. Well.
I don't agree with you like in the meatloaf, but
I would probably resist coming up to a stranger and doing this. Maybe start with somebody you know well, and you disagree. Yes?
Just to add value to this, the word "but" is oftentimes a negative.
Oh, yes.
I would say "and."
Oh, yes.
I respect.
Good point. Yeah. No buts. No buts here. We're doing ands. All right. Okay. I think we have an affirmation that we're going to end with. Take a deep breath. Together. Rather than striving to be right, I consciously create connection. And so it is on this day. Hi. If this video has inspired you, opened your heart, expanded your consciousness, filled you with hope, empowered you in some way, we encourage you to support what we offer here at Unity Center of Peace by making your donation now. And thank you.